Welcome to the Explainer. So, have you ever kept yourself awake at night wrestling with those completely impossible, logic-breaking paradoxes of human existence? You know the big ones I'm talking about. What actually happens when we die? How did the universe start if nothing can come from nothing? What even is reality? Usually, we try to answer these questions using philosophy, maybe religion. But today, we're going to do something entirely different, and honestly, a whole lot more fun. We are going to look at these massive existential mysteries through the cold, hard, unforgiving logic of computer science. That's right. Over the next few minutes, we're going to treat the ultimate mysteries of the universe exactly like a giant stack of IT support tickets. Okay, let's quickly check out our metaphysical roadmap for today. We'll be covering the post-death platform, the ultimate system error, the reality compression filter, the unobserved universe, and finally, the end of the code. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The post-death platform, reimagining the afterlife as infrastructure. So, let's move past the traditional spiritual concepts of the afterlife for a second and ask a much more practical question. If the afterlife isn't just some fluffy realm of clouds, but a functional platform, like a secondary runtime environment for consciousness, how would it actually be deployed? Think about it. If consciousness is really just a complex pattern of information, a digital soul, so to speak, what happens when it uploads? Is an afterlife just a place of lawless chaos? I mean, from a purely structural perspective, how does a multi-tenant environment maintain its data integrity? If billions of individual users, meaning you, me, literally everyone who has ever lived, can just modify their local reality through observation, how do you prevent the whole system from crashing into total entropy? If my version of heaven completely contradicts your version, whose code wins? Because a platform without rules isn't paradise, it's just chaos. Well, to exist as a stable platform without collapsing, this afterlife script would absolutely require 4 fundamental architectural components. First up, the ingestion layer. You'd need a flawless transition protocol to upload every single synaptic weight and memory without corruption. Otherwise, the platform is just hosting a bunch of fragmented ghosts. Second, the virtualized runtime. This would have to be a massive, distributed simulation engine running individual instances in parallel, just so your subjective experience doesn't accidentally overwrite mine. Third, the immutable kernel. This is your firewall against entropy. We're talking hard-coded laws acting as the ultimate authority, which prevents any migrated entity from crashing the system. And finally, the persistence layer. The state of this afterlife has to be stored on a decentralized, indestructible ledger. That ensures the data survives even if the original physical universe undergoes a total heat death. It wouldn't really be heaven or hell as we imagine it. It would simply be an incredibly resilient cloud environment. Kind of makes you look at the pearly gates a bit differently, doesn't it? Moving on to Section 2. The ultimate system error, the problem of the first cause. Okay, so every system needs an architecture to run, which brings us zooming out to the cosmic scale and what we might call the ultimate system error. We're talking about the problem of the first cause, the absolute origin point where the code begins without a single preceding line of instruction. We all know that energy cannot be created or destroyed, it only transforms. But how did the original bandwidth of energy occur in the first place to create the universe? Seriously, how can a process occur without a processor? In any system we actually understand, a process needs energy and a medium to facilitate change, like a logic gate mechanism. Without a process or memory, there is no process. You just get static. So how exactly did the universe initialize its runtime environment from absolutely nothing? We're basically looking at a profound processor paradox here. On one side, we have the materialist view, hardware as universe. In this model, the universe itself is the processor. Things like gravity and electromagnetism, those are the logic gates. The fabric of reality is just a self-executing algorithm, meaning the hardware and the software are one and the same. The universe is basically a giant self-building calculator. But then, on the other side, we have the architect view, an external orchestrator. This implies our universe is really just a virtual machine running on a much more powerful, complex, completely unseen processor, operating from a higher level in the hierarchy. But here's the catch. Both of these models hit a massive logical brick wall. And that wall is called infinite regress. This is the ultimate logical deadlock in causal reasoning. Every explanation you come up with merely shifts the boundary of the mystery one step backward, over and over and over again. Think about it. If the universe is the processor, what powered its initialization? If a metaprocessor exists outside the universe, well, what provides the energy for that? Asking what executed the first line of code before there was even a CPU leads to a complete breakdown of logic. We get so frustrated because we are constantly trying to use a linear, one-dimensional logic where A leads to B to understand a completely nonlinear system. Just listen to this quote for a second.
You have reached the edge of the map. You have found the point where the code ends and the void begins. There is no further why. There is only the execution. Wow. To actually resolve the deadlock of infinite regress, we either have to accept an axiomatic assumption, meaning that the initial state is simply an unprovable non-negotiable constant of the system, or we have to accept a self-bootstrapping loop, where the universe's end somehow provides the exact information needed to trigger its own beginning. There's no prior cause, it just is.
Which brings us to Section 3, the reality compression filter, the bandwidth limitation of the observer. All right, now that we've peered into the terrifying void of the universe's origin, let's shift gears and look a little closer to home. Let's talk about the reality you and I are experiencing right now at this exact second. Why is human observation essentially just a highly optimized lossy compression? The simple truth is, we have a massive bandwidth limitation. If we try to ingest the totality of all available data constantly running in the background of reality, we'd experience an immediate system collapse, a literal cosmic buffer overflow. So to survive, we rely on an information bottleneck. First, a hardware constraint. Our biological sensors only pick up a tiny, tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. We are running a low bitrate stream just to prevent overheating. Second, a software constraint. Our brains extract only the absolute most relevant signals from trillions of data points just to keep our models coherent for survival. And finally, the ontological filter. We don't actually interact with the true background of reality. We interact with a highly personalized user interface. Just like you click a little folder icon on your desktop instead of reading the raw binary code, your brain gives you colors and sounds instead of raw atomic data. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the entropy problem. You might think that if you could somehow remove all those filters and just merge with the vast totality of the universe, you'd achieve some sort of godhood, right? Well, actually, scratch that. You totally wouldn't. The self is basically just a localized pocket of low entropy. It is a highly organized, heavily curated data set. If you suddenly gained access to the uncompressed data of the true background, that massive 95% slice of undifferentiated universal noise, you wouldn't know everything. That sheer volume of information would just act like a universal solvent. You would experience an immediate massive spike in entropy. You would simply be completely overwritten by the noise. We are all living in the lossy compression of a much larger, much more terrifyingly complex reality. We are all just reading the metadata, never the full file. This separation is entirely by design. The boundary between you and the universe is a structural necessity. The very thing that makes you an individual is your inability to see the whole picture. Your existence is entirely defined by your limitations. Section 4. The unobserved universe, state persistence, and the immutable log. Let's see how this builds into an even more mind-bending concept. We humans have a very arrogant, observer-centric delusion. We tend to think that for an event to be real, a conscious biological mind needs to be there to perceive it. But what happens if there are no humans around at all, and a rock falls from a cliff on a completely lifeless planet and breaks? Which forces us to ask, how do we actually know a rock isn't capable of being an observer? If we step away from our own anthropocentric bias and redefine observation not as sensory perception, but as causal interaction, absolutely everything changes. In this interactionist model, a rock doesn't see light, but it sure interacts with gravity. It undergoes thermal expansion. It registers a change in state. Under this definition, the universe isn't just a collection of objects waiting for us to look at them. It's a massive, interconnected web of self-registering events. The rock is simply a low-complexity observer, while humans are high-complexity observers. And if that's true, then existence is an audit trail. When that rock shatters on a lifeless planet, the event occurred because the physical state of the system has been permanently altered. The shattered fragments are literally a write operation to the hard drive of reality. It's state persistence. The universe is a self-logging system. And this creates an objective ledger. Reality is an autonomic background process running in headless mode. I mean, a server doesn't need a monitor plugged in to run its code, and this system doesn't need a user to be active to execute gravity or momentum. This completely erases human subjectivity from the equation. We aren't the authors of reality, we are just really complex logs trying to read the logs of simpler entities. The persistence of truth is hard-coded right into the physical debris. Just think about it. During the formation of stars and the cooling of planets, the system functioned perfectly in total unobserved silence for billions of years. The stage preceded the actor. The universe remembers absolutely everything, even in the dark, even with no one around to tell. And finally, Section 5, the end of the code, telemetry data in a mature system. We've covered the platform of the afterlife, the initial processing error of creation, our incredibly lossy reality filters, and the self-logging audit trail of the universe. Which brings us to our final conclusion, so prepare for a little bit of ego destruction here. We are not the architects. We are simply tapping into an existing stream of data. The system does not need us. We are just the telemetry data being generated by its ongoing expansion. This is a pretty brutal, humbling realization. We are late arrivals to a very mature system. We've shown up to an execution that is already trillions of lines of code deep. Our observation isn't creating the universe. It's merely a sampling act of a system that is profoundly, entirely indifferent to our presence.
So, what is the ultimate takeaway? Well, you are a highly organized, heavily filtered, localized pocket of low entropy, and you are writing your own complex metadata into the grand audit trail of a self-executing universe right now. So, what lines of code are you writing today? I really hope this explainer completely shifted how you view your reality. If you enjoyed treating existential dread like a giant IT support ticket for the last 9 minutes or so, please make sure to like and subscribe to this explainer for more mind-bending deep dives. See you in the next one.